Good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. Welcome to our third public lecture for the semester. It is the second for the semester, and we still have one more to go. We usually have 3 per semester, and it's the 5th for the year, 2024. It's surprising that we're already going into October next week. But somebody told me that you just have to look at your children, then you know that the years are going. So welcome to STIAS. We particularly would like to welcome our friends, colleagues, partners, sponsors that always come and are here to support STIAS in not only putting together these amazing teams of scholars, artists in residence, and visitors from all over the world, but also to be there to listen to what they are doing. A few times I don't actually know what they're doing. So I would like to thank Gado for accepting to be the martyr today. And also to thank Professor Herman Wasserman for accepting to introduce Godfrey Mwampembwa this afternoon. But before I ask Herman to do the honor of introducing Gado, I would like to make 1 or 2 announcements. The first one, of course, is that after the presentation, our senior program manager, Christoph, will handle the question and answers and then we usually aim to finish by 17:30. And then after that, you'll be invited to a glass of water outside in the patio here. So we still have some events that are coming up. On the 2nd of October, you are invited, it's a public event. You are invited to the launch of the book, Migration Vulnerability Across the Social Protection for Select Migrant Categories. And this is edited by our fellows, Marius Olivier, Avina, and Evans Kalula. I think some of you know these individuals. So the editors will be in conversation with Nicholas Smith, who is the Dean and Professor in the Faculty of Law. So 2nd October, 17 hours to 19 hours, you're again invited. And then on the 9th of October, we'll also have another book launch by a STIAS fellow, Clive Glasser, and there'll be his latest work, A Seed of a Dream, Morris Isaacson High School and the Struggle for Education in Soweto. I don't know whether there are any individuals here who are in that school. So Clive will be in conversation with Cynthia Cross, an educationist and a leading historian of South African education, based at the University of Wits. So welcome to those events. Then we will have the Nobel Symposium in Physiology or Medicine on progress and challenges in cardiovascular medicine from the 21st to the 27th of October. And you're invited to the opening session, which is an open session on the 21st. And also invited on Tuesday, the 22nd, to the Chancellor's, Stellenbosch University Chancellor's lecture that will be given by Professor Joran Hansen, and he will be talking about the secrets of becoming a Nobel laureate, or the secrets that go on, and giving us some tips on how we all can be Nobel laureates. And then we'll conclude the public events on the 14th of November with another STIAS public lecture by Elizabeth Lutz from the Faculty of Economics and Management Sciences at the University of Pretoria. But there are other events that happen here that you're always invited to, and please continue to support us. I would like also to recognize some of our fellows, former fellows, but fellows, because once a fellow, you're always a fellow, that are here in the audience. And also in particular, I would like to recognize Yanni, who's been here. So those of you who are fellows before, you went through his kind hands of making sure that you become fellows. So Yanni, it's always a pleasure to see you, and all of you that will be recognized by Christoph in the Q&A. May I now introduce very briefly Herman, who is going to introduce, I was wondering whether they were testing my side. Herman Wasserman is Professor of Journalism and Chair of the Department of Journalism at Stellenbosch University. This is also his alma mater, where he obtained the doctorate in literature and a postgraduate degree in journalism. He worked as a newspaper reporter before embarking on his academic career, and I think that professionally relates very well with Gado. Herman holds an A rating from the National Research Foundation, which of course attests to his international leadership in his field and the quality and impact of his research output. He has published widely on journalism, ethics, media, conflict, democracy, and disinformation in Africa, and his latest publication is the co-edited volume, Disinformation in the Global South. Apart from having taught in several universities in South Africa, the UK, Germany, United States, the Netherlands, and China, Herman is a fellow and board member of the International Communication Association, and also actually he is an elected member of the Academy of Science of South Africa. So we're both members of ASAF. So that's why he has been invited here. He's also editor-in-chief of African Journalism Studies and Annals of the International Communications Association and associate editor of International Communication Gazette. He also serves on editorial boards of several other international journals. So Gado, you know where some of your work is going to find its way. And on that note, I would like to ask Herman to come and present Gado. Thank you.
Good afternoon, colleagues, friends. I'm delighted to be here this afternoon to introduce our speaker, Godfrey Mwampembwa, better known as Gado. I think we in South Africa are all very keenly aware of the important role of the media and journalism to expose corruption, to hold powerful to account, to build communities, to keep us all on our toes. And we are often, I think, however, in South Africa, not always that well informed about what goes on the rest of the continent. I think one of the things that I always try to make my students more aware of is to look north to the rest of our continent and to also enter into conversation with other journalists, other editorial outlets on the continent. And so it's a great pleasure to have earlier this week met Gado in our department. I hope we'll be seeing more of you there as well later on. We're also planning another event with Gado and some other South African cartoonists. But this afternoon, it is our pleasure and our honor to listen to you, Gado. Gado is an editorial cartoonist born in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, but now lives in Nairobi, Kenya, where he's currently the editorial cartoonist for the Standard newspaper. He received his training at the Mass Communication Institute in Treviso, Italy, and the Vancouver Film School in Canada. Before taking on his current role at the Standard, Gado was the editorial cartoonist and illustrator for the East African paper The Nation for about 24 years, I think, if my calculation is correct, a long time. He's also, however, contributed to international outlets such as Courier International, Le Monde in France, New African, NORAD, Norway, and the Deutsche Welle Swahili service. What was particularly interesting to me was to learn or to be reminded that Gado was the creative force behind the satirical puppet show, the XYZ show. It's something that I have actually been familiar with the show, but it was good to be reminded that you were the creative force based on a French cartoon, a French puppet show that you brought to Africa. And it was also inspiring to learn that you didn't give up, despite all the challenges that were in your way, you managed to bring that to Kenya. For those of you that are unfamiliar with it, it was a spoof news show run by puppets. And maybe we can call this a good example of fake news, because it was a sort of satirical news show. I mean, think in the sort of same format as The Daily Show back then, the Jon Stewart and later Trevor Noah, but this was run by puppets. And these puppets exposed the rampant corruption and mismanagement in Kenya, and I think also in the process critiqued the news media itself. And that show appeared on numerous television stations since its inception in 2009. So when we look at all these achievements, it's not surprising then that in 2014, Gado was named as one of the 100 most influential people in Africa by the magazine The New African. And in 2011 was one of 12 extraordinary leaders to receive a Visionaries Award from Ford Foundation for their innovative efforts on the front line of key social issues. So one such key social issue on the African continent is the radicalisation of East African coastal communities, primarily driven by extremist groups like Shabaab, which has connections to global terror organizations such as Qaeda and ISIS. After 4 years of doing research on this topic, Gado is using his residency here at STIAS to write a graphic comic novel titled The Martyr, which depicts one young man's entanglement in this complex web, connecting socioeconomic inequality, marginalisation, radicalisation, and violent extremism in Kwale County. We are extremely delighted to have you here with us this afternoon, Gado. We look forward to hearing more about this project this afternoon and to learn more about your scholarship and your unique practice. So welcome and thank you.
Thank you. Before I start, I would like to really thank STIAS, Edward, and his team. You guys have been fantastic. Edward, Gina, Nelmari, Karen, Gamuchirai, Charlene, Noloyiso, Christoph, Magda, Gina, and those that I have not named. I think you have made, and I think I can speak even for my fellow fellows, that you have made our life really, really comfortable here, and it has been heartwarming. I would also like to thank my fellow fellows. You guys have not only enriched my project here, but it has been great just to be part of this community, and I think I've enjoyed, and quite frankly, I have managed to do quite a lot as far as my project is concerned. I think I know Edward said you have to apply again after 5 years. I'm trying to think if I can extend my stay here. So I've started my campaign a bit early. I would also like to thank a few of my colleagues who I know are online. I think they did text me to say that they're watching this online, and so that I'm very happy about. Now, before probably I talk about my project here, I would probably also share the work that I've done in the past. I think probably that will give a little bit of a context of where I come from and what I'm doing here. Of course, as Herman put it very eloquently, that my project is a comic book project that is looking at the radicalization in the East African coast, whereby we've had quite a number of young people that have been radicalized and they had to travel from Kenya to Somalia to join Al-Shabaab, and many of them actually have come back, and but before that, I've covered that topic also as an editorial cartoonist in many of my drawings. But so before, I will probably, this one works, yeah. So that is pretty much a daily occurrence for any editorial cartoonist. You have quite a number of from religious zealots to government officials to crazies, and that are, after you, literally. So I have to apologize because that one I did that before he became president. So now I suppose it's a little bit unpresidential. But we might get there again. This is about Africa and China and the Chinese influence in Africa. I think this is a subject that probably you guys are very much aware, and probably we will continue to have it for a long time to come. This is also during COVID, how the authoritarian governments, and pretty much many governments, just used the pandemic rather to clamp on the press freedom, and especially in the East African, where we went through that. It's hard also to avoid this guy. This was more recent. I think it's about what's going on in Gaza and Israel, and the appropriation of the word genocide. I think that is also a topic that we are going to be. It's going to be with us for quite some time. This is a while ago. I suppose that is the Saudi king. I think what he did to my kind, especially Mr. Khashoggi, was as shocking as you all can remember. This is what the inauguration of the current president in Kenya. Yes, here is the attack on LGBT community from Uganda. I suppose that is President Museveni. I suppose he wanted to attack the rainbow, the symbol, and of course much close to everywhere, it's the issue of the climate change and what it pertains. This is a series of covers that I've done for an online publication that I'm a contributor, the Continent, that is actually based in Johannesburg. So this was talking about the dawn of artificial intelligence and look at what are where is Africa in all this discussion. And so sometimes this is what artists we do very well. We plagiarize sometimes the work of great masters, and I think there was the Michelangelo will have to forgive me for that. And of course, the inauguration of the king, and more recent that we have the moment of truth for those who follow the politics of Tanzania and East Africa, what is happening there with the new president, not new anymore, Samia Suluhu Hassan. So, yes, now back to my project that I'm doing. I did my research quite, so for those, I was born in Dar, but I'm working as I'm working in Nairobi, and I did my research pretty much around this area, which is Kwale. If you were to go back, so that tells the story. Yeah, I think this is a better one. We can just probably, yeah, so it's somewhere around this area near Mombasa, where you have actually probably it is much affected by the problem of radicalization, probably more than any other place. Now, just to put things in context, I mean, you're talking of, the cost of Kenya, Mombasa. You have actually, probably a population of 3.2 million, and contribute hugely to the economy of Kenya because of tourism, and also because it's also, and actually it's, the cost is the reason why Kenya actually is very influential when it comes to the geopolitical position of Kenya. If you have along the coast of Kenya, you have actually American doing naval practices quite, and I think they're building a base in Manda Bay if they don't have one. So it is for that background that also that has made this problem of radicalization pretty murky and quite intense. Now, it is also important probably we look back at how, where we come from as far as this problem is concerned. I mean, if the list of attacks of terror attacks in Kenya since 1988, there has been a couple, but I think these were not, related to terrorism as we know it. We had the first one in August 7th, 1998, when a truck bomb exploded outside the U.S. Embassy in Nairobi. That was the first one. And actually, I was in the office not very far from where that happened. And we had the tremor, all of us who were working, only to realize later what was happening. We lost friends. I lost friends there. And I think the second one was the Kikambala bombing. That was a missile attack in Mombasa. The blast occurred with some 60 visitors. I believe they were from Israel, and 13 were killed. Between 2011 and 2012, we've had at least 17 attacks. These were sporadic attacks, happening now and then and here and there across Kenya. In September 21st, we had a big attack at Westgate Shopping Mall, where Al-Shabaab attacked the Westgate Mall in Nairobi, leading to the death of about 67 and about 175 that were injured. This was quite a big attack. And you had, I think, also this one was one of those, it shook the country, because the idea of actually the manner in which how it happened, and I think there was held up for quite a number of hours when this was still going on. And in June 2014, we had the Mpeketoni attack, which is also in Lamu area, in the Kenyan. This is northeastern part, sort of, to speak, or eastern coast of. In 2015, there was another big attack, and Garissa University was attacked, and this was huge. 148 people were killed. And then Lamu and Tana River attacks. You had various incidents that happened in 2014 to 2015. These all were said to have been propagated by Al-Shabaab. June 2014, we had Tongweni area in Mombasa, resulted in several deaths, and also police. So these people sometimes would attack the police posts. And then January 2019, there was also Dusit Hotel attack, and in which 21 people were killed. This also happened in Nairobi. And then you have had, ongoing attacks now and then in different parts of Kenya. And not to mention also, it's important to mention also, you have the northeastern, if I'm to take you back, I think also, you have had, you have several attacks around, all these areas bordering Somalia. You have several attacks here, that have been happening over the years. And so that is probably one, chronologically, that we can put the more recent and big attacks. So my project, what is I was looking at, I did a series of interviews. It was a community-based research in which I was looking at the individuals who actually, for one way or the other, especially the young combatants who have traveled to join Al-Shabaab. A lot of them were disillusioned and they came back. You're trying to find these young people and young men and women, and it's very, very difficult because most of them also, when they come back, is that you're sort of like in a double-edged sword. You are haunted by Al-Shabaab because you disappeared. You are, at the same time, the relationship between these recruits and also the authority in Kenya is not good at all. And so they tend to come and just, weave their way into the society and nobody knows. So it's very difficult to find them. And you have actually to really know people and get to spend some time in order actually to get to meet them and actually speak to them. And it takes quite a while for you to get to meet them. It's a typical market in Kwale and in Kwale County. This is also probably a part of what I'm doing. It's a lunchtime, where you have laborers working. These are builders and laborers, and you would have this kind of the backdrop of buildings, but you will have women who would cook food, and this, people would do their lunch. That's probably a shopping center in Kwale, and so you have also an area that actually is very poor historically it's an area that has been very much marginalized, and you don't have a lot of development going on. You have, education standards are very low. You have poverty is huge. A lot of young people, majority of them, you find that they have a primary education, and more so in an area like Kwale, also women are even more or less disadvantaged. So this is probably a typical school, and this is probably a very good school by Kwale standard, I should say. I visited about 7 villages in total, back and forth. Again, in general, they were the center of my research in terms of the people that I wanted to speak to. So those are pictures to give you a feel of that, and I needed to do this because one of the my methodology rather was also to use some of these backgrounds as my backgrounds for my drawings. So I went to these places and I literally had to draw some of these places and take live drawings and all that, because I wanted to give it more authenticity to an attempt. Rather, if you're telling a story, then at least there should be an authenticity, and it is easy to get stuff from online and probably use that. But once you visit and understand the culture of the people, it's totally a different, it gives you a completely different nuance and understanding of the place. Now, if you are to juxtapose that to what we, or rather majority of people, know about Kwale and Mombasa in general, the East African coast, is also, we know it because of its pristine beaches and very lovely hotels, and and a lot of people, including East Africans, go to these hotels and to the airport, to the bus stop, and they go back, and they think that is actually the Kwale, but actually you have a totally different side of Kwale that also a lot of, I dare say, a lot of Kenyans, and I think my sister Joki would agree with me, that people have no clue actually of the real Kwale and the marginalization and poverty that exists in these places. So you have wonderful hotels that there. And so, as I mentioned, you have a lot of young people who have actually joined Al-Shabaab, and the numbers are quite dire. If you are to look at, I think it is said that about 700 that have joined Al-Shabaab. And it is also, I mean, these numbers, I must admit that they are, here, there, but we can work with them. Reports you have, if you have 1,500 young men who have probably agreed to join government programs and so forth, then what about those who have not? And there are quite many, and this is the worry that has always been there as far as this challenge is concerned. And again, you are talking of also that the backdrop is that the communities that don't have a good relationship with the government of the day, that, if you are to go historically, goes back way before independence, when you had actually, again, the government has neglected this place. But also, if you even go further, this is also the coast that was known for slave trade. And despite having the inhabitants, the indigenous, Africans there being one of the, in terms of history, you're talking of the region that has been trading with, Far East and other countries for centuries, but yet you are talking about the people, the majority of the inhabitants of the coast are, poor, and the government that took over, that is the government of Kenyatta, I think they continued with the same process, that you have the communities that have been very much marginalized, and actually poverty has been one of the main features of these areas. And that's also a very, another, as my friend Vine would say, that is a story for another day, which is also a very long story. So I did visit also the broader Mombasa, because you also have from Kwale, some of the young men who would go to Mombasa, and where you've had, we had the imams and these sheikhs that were doing the recruitment, and they would be recruited, and it is very easy sometimes to look and say, probably you want to fix that with very easy fix, but they are not really also easy fix with the problem. Now, in the effort to clamp down on this problem, the government really came in hard and really attacked some of the groups and communities in the coast, and you are the reaction, because for a long time the government, did not know how to handle that. And yes, you've had issues in which you've had also a lot of people that were with this group, the happenings that I also mentioned. But when this government woke up and started to deal with this problem, it basically, went in hard, and in the end, it resulted to extrajudicial killings. It resulted in killing a lot of young people. A lot of innocent people were killed in these raids in the area of Kwale. There was a lot of destruction. A lot of families that were they lost their relatives, their loved ones. I did speak to women who they had their husbands killed in front of them and in front of their children, and nothing has happened up to today. And it is actually quite telling that, and these were, they depended on this, and even after that happened, nothing has actually, there has never been any sort of compensation and so forth. So in many ways also you have that exacerbating the problem. So some of these actually also, you see, these are my rough drawings that I'm doing. So you see that they have a lot of, these are rough for my project here. And so because I'm catching up with time, I just said, okay, I'll include them. So don't bother with them. You would see a lot of writing that have nothing to do with this project. And yes, also you've had, they profiled a lot of these young people, they tortured them. And you have young people, a lot of them, some, they've suffered from, the post-traumatic has been as traumatic as it gets. I mean, some of them up to date, they cannot actually. There is a young man who I got to meet, and he was not only, there is an organization that have tried to help him, but it has become very difficult to help him. He's gotten into drugs, and every time there is a relapse, at one point they tried to, at one time he got cleaned, but then he got back. But the challenge is that, when this young man, the challenge was whenever he goes to get the ID or whatever, because he's already blacklisted, he couldn't get his ID. And then, so then it makes it difficult for him rather to get a job or to get, And then, when that happens, it actually, you pull these young people and young men and women to the other side. And so this has been going on, and you have a situation whereby you have quite a number of these young people. And as I mentioned, you have also young people who also going to the government. They say these government set up programs. They are afraid simply because of actually what they have seen happening. So it makes the problem even much more complex. Now, it is important and very instructive to note that also you've had also, Al-Shabaab affiliates and Al-Shabaab rather associates. They have also killed a number of people who were deemed to collaborate with government of the day, government officials, let's say chiefs. And so you have also, on one hand, civilians and people, or rather, the communities that are caught in between. On one hand, you have the forces of Al-Shabaab and these terrorists, and then on the other hand, you have actually the government that is also not doing a better job to protect them. And so we can look at what is, radicalization. Now, I should also put a disclaimer here. I mean, words are very, we have to be careful, as again my friend Vinay warned me, and I totally agree, because the the challenge you have with some of these labels, as you can read, these are also labels that actually they are used very selectively. And when I started my project, I remember telling a friend that I actually also do not, I put these labels all aside. But for the sake of also the work that, we do, labeling is also something you have to work with. But they are problematic in every sense. If we look at, for example, how we call, we throw these words and we call these guys extremists. But you are talking of communities that have lived in extreme conditions for decades, yet you dare to call them their extremists. So we say, oh, these guys are radicalized, that is radicalization. But we have Jehovah's Witnesses going door to door, radicalizing people. We don't say that radicalization. So again, they are problematic, but academics and agree. I think, as I said, for me, these are also labels that you can work with, and they're helpful in that sense, but they are problematic in their application, really. So I did that also quite a while ago. This drawing is I think 2013, if I'm not. And we had this, from the Somali-Kenya border, where you had, as you will see, there are three types of drivers, as they call drivers of violent extremism, and you have structural and societal drivers, which you have marginalization, security, legal system, human rights abuses, and so forth. Then you have psycho-social drivers, which are peer pressure, status, seeking revenge, and then enabling factors, which are terror networks, corruption, poorly governed areas. As you can see in many, the border between Kenya and Somalia is very porous. And a lot of that has happened in the sense that you have corruption plays a big part in it. You have these guys, they can come in with guns, and a lot of guns that found their way all the way to Kwale were actually smuggled from Somalia because, police were also on the take, and so forth. But again, it's also important to note that these three are not mutually exclusive. They very much work along each other, within each other. So I did this drawing when I was dealing with Boko Haram. And you have this similar issue. I mean, a lot of issue in Nigeria when it comes to Boko Haram, it's also corruption by the police. The police are, and they allow some of, and groups like Al-Qaeda, groups like, ISIS, they know that, and they've used that very well in many of these, African states where you have the problem of radicalization and violent extremism. So this was particularly, I did this for the Nigerian problem. That was 2012, but it can apply to, this drawing can apply, to any other scenario in East Africa, in Mali or anywhere. Now, more often than not, we have also reports that actually one of the things I did find out is that, and I must admit I was also a victim of this, I personally also did this, is that sometimes we tend to look at the communities that are affected by radicalization, and also I must admit in young people, we look at them in a very, very, simplistic terms, and because of the terms and labels that we have, we throw them around pretty much easily. And I did this drawing a while ago while talking about, skills, and Al-Shabaab, in this sense I was saying, Al-Shabaab, they recruit anybody, but actually it is much more nuanced than that. Actually, Al-Shabaab also, they recruit actually even more than that. They recruit also quite, the people that you find that they've joined Al-Shabaab, they've actually, for very myriad of reasons, and some of them are very smart, young men and women. And to go further, I think I can add that now the online recruitment has added even another layer to the whole issue. I think the Dusit bombing that killed 21 people, the guy who planned that was a university student dropout, and so and he got married, and he joined Al-Shabaab, and that's how he was recruited online. So we need to be more nuanced in that. So it's also, what is interesting is that the issue also of radicalization is that it is complex, but also there are quite also a number of layers in this, in the issue. In a sense, you also have a lot of, you have drug trafficking issues involved. You have you have also the issue of, arms trafficking. Some of the routes that these young men use, they are also the same routes that are used by armed traffickers and human trafficking. They traffic women using these routes and so forth. And so the challenge sometimes it's in tackling these issues is that, you have probably, in the beginning, probably one kind of approach of how to sort this out, but then you actually have a lot of, these big forces that actually, no matter what you do, they are part and parcel, and then you're going to link all these other, issues like corruption, that you find that you're dealing with a much, much bigger problem. And also what is interesting is that it's of course, the role of state, political leaders, and also the international community. The United States, for example, has been the one that has trained Kenya anti-terror unit, for example, and the methods that they use, for example, in Kwale, have been widely criticized because they also ended up killing a lot of innocent people. And these, you can say it has actually even added probably fuel to the problem, to the fire that is the problem, rather than actually helping. And so that is also one issue that probably it also needs to be looked at, and it is also part of what very much I've been I'm trying to incorporate in my story. So these you have also, again, just to give you an overview of the Kwale as a place that it's on your right. It's some of the drawings that I've probably have done while in Kwale. This is still this is the same. So I did interview lots of, rather, I should say, ex-combatant who actually, came back from this terror group, and also those who had aspired to join, but also spoke to a lot to academics who have written. I must admit and I must say that my work also was made easier by a lot of academics that have written, that I will show in the end, that have written eloquently and quite incisively on the issue of radicalization in East Africa. Spoken to religious leaders. Some of them were the target actually of Al-Shabaab, and they had to go into hiding for some time. Actually, in Kwale, I spoke to people who have worked in civil society, people who actually were really involved in the issue of working with communities. You had people, for example, when this campaign was going on, you had a lot of people that were killed, and actually there were young people that were dumped in some forests. But you had actually community leaders and people who actually had to go and collect these bodies so that they can be identified and their people can come and collect them and bury them. So you've also had some very gruesome encounter with some of these characters that it is, for me, amazing. Some of them actually are still actually working in that area, because it's terrifying, the kind of work that they've been doing. Of course, I've also spoken to journalists, a number of journalists who actually have covered the issue of radicalisation. Then, yeah, this goes back just to talk, also still talking about the people that I've spoken to, and also security agents that were part and parcel of some of these operations. So this is pretty much, these are very rough drawings that I'm working on. So, it's probably, I'll have to produce over 200 of these. So I hope you understand, because when I say that I need extension from Edward, that is that 200 pages of this, it's not a mean feat. But it just gives you the drafts, and will give you a sense of probably how the artwork will look like and so forth. But why comics, and why is it that I personally chose to go along with this line? So I think graphic novels have become quite a powerful tool for ages now. Especially when you're tackling complex issues, they are a very good tool. And I think you've had a number of very successes. I think one of my favorite is Persepolis 1 and 2. It was done by a lady, Marjan Satrapi, who, it tells a story of his, he was from Iran and he had to go to escape to France, so it's a wonderful story. They did develop it into a film. It's a brilliantly, done book with a wonderful style, childlike style in which she tells her story. It's one of the favorite. And then also you have this one. I did manage to get a copy of Joe Sako's Footnotes in Gaza. It's another volume, graphic novel volume, that is very well illustrated and very well done. And I just included these ones because also to just show, in Africa, it's important also to, the graphic novel as a genre, it's growing, but also it is something that actually I believe it can be used also, as an educational material, also as, not only, it's a medium that can be used also in many areas. I think policymakers can also, should think about incorporating that in their discussions, because actually in Kenya there was a movement to include graphic comic books as part of the set books, alternative set books. But as you know, set books are always it's a very contested space for those in education. So there's always this back and forth. But I think there's no there's no doubt that graphic novels are actually, are becoming increasingly more important in our societies today when it comes to actually telling of stories. Now, I've included a couple of others just to give you a context, and I think my good friend and fellow Helen gave me this one. I'm still reading, All Rise, which is, it tells the stories of resistance and rebellion during South Africa's apartheid between 2010 and 2048. It's a wonderful book done by, you have 8 South African artists who actually contributed to this. Metro by Magdi Al-Shafi, sets in Cairo. It's a story of bank robbery and I think it's about 2 friends. This one, it is also in Arabic and English. Ivorian writer Marguerite Abouet probably has done quite a lot, and I think there's a film on this, Aya de Yapugon. She has gone ahead to do a couple of volumes on this, I think, rather stories, and you're talking of about, there's also, as I said, I think there's a film to this, so it's actually a very fascinating artist, and always wonderful to see also, I must admit also there is also to see women graphic artists who are also getting into the scene. This is wonderful. Kenya, in Kenya we have the famous Luanda wa Magere. There are a number of projects have been done on this particular story, but more recent we have Wana wa Magere, which is also serialization of short serialization of this folklore. And then there is Congo 50, which talks about the Democratic Republic of Congo's post-independence. And again, this one you also have about 8 artists who have contributed to it. They're telling a story of a fascinating book. I'm trying to get hold of it also. It has been actually, and I think this is also a big challenge when it comes to this genre, because it's also accessing this material is always very difficult. And I think the bigger challenge is also you have the bigger part of Africa, people who also cannot afford to get these books. And also you have Ibrahim Oshoko's June 12, which recounts Nigeria's 1993 election, when the military regime basically transferred power. This is one book I'm also trying to get hold of. It's wonderful. I've just seen a few pages, but trying to get hold of it. And then also there is, interestingly, there is also a growing list of work that is being translated into graphic novels. More recently there is Sapien. There is, it has been done into 2 volumes now by Yuval Noah Harari. I got hold of To Kill a Mockingbird recently, actually at Cape Town, book launch Cape Town. There is this illustrated version of To Kill a Mockingbird, and it's a wonderful illustrated book. That I think the artist did wonderful justice to the story. Back to my project, I think I've done, I still have to travel to do some more interviews in Lamu, also visit, hopefully, Kismayo and Mogadishu, if possible, and hopefully, if everything goes well, I hope I will be. Again, it's a tough call, but 2025, I hope I'll be done with the project. As I said, I've also when I started this project, those many years ago, it was the sheer volume of actually the complexity of the project, it blew me away. And I think I nearly dropped it because simply it is also very, very difficult subject. And so again, as I said, I had to go through a lot of material that wrote about, and a lot of scholars who have written about radicalization. Earlier on, I read quite some stuff for Anneli Bota, South African scholar. She has written quite a lot on radicalization in East Africa, and many others. Willis Mwakimako, whom I've met, Obonyo. I'm glad that actually my sister Njoki will introduce me to Mkutu and others, because there is some work that I still need to be doing. And I think I would like to end with this drawing. I think I did this long before the Danish cartoons. And I thought I was being cute by, I thought I was being fair, because I think for all we know that men get 72 virgins. And I thought the whole equation is a bit skewed, because I needed to understand what happened when female suicide bombers carry out these missions. And I did that because it happened, around that time you had quite a number of female suicide bombers in Lebanon and in Jordan, if I'm not mistaken. And this cartoon was published in The Nation, but it was also, I think the Daily Nation had to apologize on its front page, because they were, the Muslim leaders were all up in arms, and I got a lot of memos and death threats, and also we had to pull it out of online, and I was threatened and so forth. But again, as I said, I thought I'm just being gender sensitive and trying to ask the question so that we can all know. But it didn't end very well. But on that very good note, I think, thank you very much for your time.
Gado, thank you for drawing us carefully into all these different layers of a very big and complex reality, but also for enticing us with your work. I think we all can't wait to get our hands by the end of next year, if all goes well, on the final product. It will be a wonderful moment to see that, and thank you for sharing all of that. It was wonderful. I wanted to acknowledge a couple of persons online, particularly some STIAS fellows who've joined us, fellows who had previously been in residence and fellows who yet will be in residence. So David Moore, Ilan Shabe, Kepari, Klaus Kornwachs, Nelson Casfier, several others. Good to know, to see your names online. And everyone else who joined us online, thank you very much. Of course, those of you in the room here, also let's have an opportunity for some questions and answers. We'll limit the Q&A to those in the room. Those online, please feel free to send a chat in the chat room, and we'll make sure that Godfrey gets that as well. So I'd like to open the floor for any feedback, questions, comments. Let's start with Vinay and then Hans. Thank you, and I should have said, we have the microphone here for the benefit of those online.
I want to just begin with a comment and then move to the question. The comment is about the word radicalization, about which you spoke. I want to offer a proposition that the problem is much deeper than we think. And the proposition is that radicalization is in fact a code word for Islamophobia. Now let me explain exactly what I mean very briefly. You go to a place like Sri Lanka or Myanmar, both of which are Buddhist countries, and both of which Sri Lanka had waged a brutal civil war. against a non-Buddhist minority for decades. And remember that the overwhelming impression of Buddhism in the West is of a religion that's peaceful, conducive to meditation, etc., etc. You go to Myanmar, you have the same problem, the manner in which they treated the Rohingyas. You go to the United States, where white Christian supremacists have been on a rampage for decades. In none of these instances is the word radicalization ever used in the literature. I can assure you of that. I know the literature on Sri Lanka, Myanmar. I have never seen that word radicalization used to refer to Buddhists. So there are lots of fault lines. In this case, we have to be aware that there is a particular kind of emphasis which cannot be openly displayed all the time. And therefore, this is what I mean when I say it's a code word for Islamophobia. So one has to really be self-reflective about how one is going to use it, if one's going to use it at all. The question for you is a very different one, and that is that you are basically an editorial cartoonist. Now, the editorial cartoonist, the tools of the trade are things like caricature, blunt humor, right? Almost savagery at times, if I may put it this way. I think that's essential to produce a good cartoon very often. If you go to the graphic novel, and the three people who come to my mind as the supreme artists of the graphic novel, Joe Sacco, whom you mentioned, Osamu Tezuka, the Japanese master of the manga, which is a graphic novel, okay, and Art Spiegelman. As far as I know, I might be mistaken, but they never really were editorial cartoonists. The question for you now is this: do you think it requires a different sensibility to work with the graphic novel? You may be drawing still, but do you think it requires a different sensibility to work as an editorial cartoonist and as a graphic novelist? And have you seen any crossover, any really prominent examples of crossovers between the graphic novel and the editorial cartoon?
Yeah, so, yes, thanks, Vinay, for your insight. And on your first one, I agree. I mean, and I literally raised that issue because even when I was conducting these, interviews, you could see that. But more importantly, also in Kenya, for example, if you have to look also even in Kenya, the application of these words, it's also, you find a string of these words being used also way before independence. Who were terrorists and so forth. You find that when Kenya was fighting they went during the northern frontier districts, you had the same language being used, and then now they are being applied, to the coastal area. To you can say yes, Islamophobia, but also if you are to zoom in Kenya alone, you find that they are really selectively used. Now, I agree, it is problematic in the sense that, each literature that you find these words. And that is why I raised even the issue. I said, if we had to look at actually what about, it's never applied when you have Christian radicalization. If we are to use that in the same direct manner, you don't find it. So I agree that is problematic. I think it was quite challenging while working on this project, and so forth. And even the word, as I said, the word violent extremism. I mean, what is that? I mean, if you are to look at the people in Kwale that were labeled that these are violent extremism, and it's much more dangerous when the press picked it up, and actually now when they are used rather loosely. So I agree. There's need to be more introspection and actually about that. And I think as an editorial cartoonist, that was one thing that up to today is still a problem. I think the way I'm also, because of this project, the way I'm also framing some of my work is totally different, and it has been challenging. On your second question, the issue of it is also, that one is also a challenge to make that big shift, because it is also almost a very different, not genre, yeah, almost you can say, for lack of a better word. So it requires a lot of adjustment, if I may say so, because you are as an editorial cartoonist, you wake up in the morning, you deal with the news, and you have to read, but also as an editorial cartoonist, you are not also secluded. I mean, I'm one person who have read voraciously about lots of other, comics and other books, and so your interest in your subjects has always to be, at least for me, has always to go beyond your editorial work, and for a deeper understanding of the subject that you're dealing with. So I've always done that, and I think that has been very helpful. Now, one of the things that was also helpful is that because I've dealt with this, this topic from, on different, incidentally, when this happens and so forth and so forth. But I also went ahead also to very much also read about the radicalisation and extremism and Islamophobia and so forth. And I also must add is that when I decided is that I did look at, did a lot of reading before I decided to actually do this project. Why I decided to do is that because I also found that it's fascinating that there are a lot of stories that are actually not told, that were never told about this. For example, these women that I spoke to, these young men, these stories, nobody knows about them. So before I even actually wrote anything, I actually just went about and actually talked to this. I just was talking to people, collecting data, and I was not even writing any, I was jotting stuff and writing, and so I spent quite over a year just going and digging through material and reading and understanding this. And yes, it is a very complex issue. Now you have, when you come to, so that has been helpful in terms of actually, in terms of putting together and piecing it together. Now, but yes, there have been artists who have actually have done that, because in a way, you have artists that have done editorial, but they've also done short comics. One of them is Steve Bell. I think Bell has done that with The Guardian. He has done short comics, not longer versions, which in the end you can actually now put together for a longer version. But not many. I agree with you. It is something that it's tedious. But in my case, also I must add, actually, my first ever project, actually, as an artist, actually, was actually a comic book. I did when at the age of 12, I think thereabouts. My mother gave, told us a story as kids, and I went to illustrate the whole story. And remarkably, I actually sold that, to a friend for 15 Tanzanian shillings, which I actually ended up just blew it up on donuts. I think that week I was the king. So I blew it up, when it comes to donuts and fried cassavas. And so, yeah, so I have, for one reason or another, I've also done that genre, not seriously on one project, but I've done, over the years, I've done short comic stories. I have read, I have, written and so forth. And that gave me sort of like that leap to start on this project. But I agree, it is actually, I really had to think twice about this, because it's a lot much more work. And as I said, that's why I also had to take a sabbatical, because you can't do, I had to, from June this year, I had to, in the past I was, I have to do, then take a break. During the break, I would go and do the research and so forth. But now, from June this year, I totally had to take a sabbatical from my work as an editorial cartoonist.
Thanks, Vinay. I hope your friend kept that book. We'll have Hans next, and I'll note the three persons after that.
Our project is to write a graphic novel, and what you've shown us is maybe closer to a graphic documentary or a graphic analysis. So I'm curious about how you would shape the novel. Would you do it in terms of a novel I usually read as a couple of people I could identify with, feel sympathetic about, and to me that seems difficult in this context, to create individuals, if you would, in a novel that one would feel sympathetic about. How will you go about that, making it a novel? You haven't told us much about that yet, seems.
Okay. The reason is because I hope you'll buy the book. So if I tell you now, that's the whole deal. But no, but I agree. It's challenging. The idea with the story is actually I've tried to weave real events into fictional characters. So that's the struggle that I'm working with. But of course, I have, so after some years, I had to write a synopsis, and then I had to work what I call a chapter for a roadmap for my chapters. And also the style is that, I'm doing it in a back and forth, which is very difficult, because if you do it in film, it's much easier, but in graphic novel, it's much more difficult. But it's a struggle that I'm working on, and I totally agree with you that, yeah, it's a very difficult to write, for characters that, because my character, I've collapsed quite a number of characters in one character. It's not a single character, that single story that I'm working with. There are different characters that I've had to, to put together to get to just one character, and because it's also very complex and very different. The story is actually, you have, for example, just to give you an example, you have actually quite a number of young people with different stories. So it is difficult also to pick one story and actually run with it, because then you'll miss out on actually quite a number of them. And so that is that, because it's a fictional story, I think you have the liberty of now, you can put this string of stories together just to fit as one character. And that's the approach that I'm trying to do. Whether I'll be successful is, as Vinay would say again, is a totally different story.
Good. Thanks, Hans. I had three more names, the Cynthia, Kanika, and the person in the blue denim. And we'll see if we can have another round after those three, but let's see how we go. So Cynthia, please. Over here, sorry. No.
Thanks very much, Gado. I really enjoyed that. My question is something to the person who's asked you about how you're going to make this into a novel. And I imagine you've stressed the complexity, and I imagine you're going to try and give us insight into this person who might, if we've just read about him in the news report, he might repel us, but we're going to start understanding, why. And maybe this is a bit of a reductionist question, having said all that, but you've stressed that maybe this could be something introduced into the school curriculum, and I would want to know why, in what way would it be, I don't want it to be too reductive, but in what way would it be educational?
Yes. Okay. So I didn't say my book should be introduced. There is a distinction. I didn't say my book should be, I said comic as a genre.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, comic as a genre.
But I'm thinking, I'm very interested to think about.
Yeah.
Yes, precisely because you stressed complexity, and a lot of stuff that ends up in our schools is quite shallow and polemical.
Yeah.
And so it would be quite interesting to put something that's complex and makes us feel, really,
Yeah.
these are tough decisions that have to be made. These are difficult choices.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And so, for example, I'll give you another. There's a report that came out a few years ago that it was called Black and White report or something. It's about actually the sugar and charcoal trade in Somalia. So when Kenya went in, the KDF went into Somalia to fight Al-Shabaab, you had also that the report came out that also there were, also you had generals and soldiers that were trading with Al-Shabaab. Basically, you have actually, allowing sugar and charcoal to trade. Now, think about that. I mean, you've gone to defeat this guy, but also you're doing business with that. So these are some of the complexities that actually they are part and parcel of this story. And sometimes these are not known in the broader public. And sometimes there's a report and so forth. But actually, when you speak to people there, yes, there's a reason that actually these people have to do trade, that you are, and these are some of the issues that I'm tackling. That you've gone to fight these people, but actually you have agreed to do business, that you will allow certain lorries with sugar to pass, there, okay, we'll tax them, Al-Shabaab will tax them, or when they come here, they will allow. So these are complexities that if you look at it, say, how is it? I mean, does it help the cause? I mean, what does that mean in the broader context of actually fighting terror? So there are these kind of issues that also, I personally am still grappling with, in the process of writing the book. And I must admit also, it is, you also have to understand I'm working on this book, so this book is not out. And so you should confine your questions. Yeah.
Cynthia Kanika next.
Thank you, Gado. That was wonderful. I'm always interested in the interface between image and text. And graphic novelists adopt different strategies for incorporating texts into their work. Some might include the text in the panels, some might have bubbles, some might include it in the gutter, so there are different ways of doing it, So tell us a little bit about how you are thinking of this interface between the image and the text, because we have talked about this, you and I, a little bit, and one of the things you said you encountered, one of the difficulties you encountered is writing the text, which I think you are doing alongside, but then also thinking about the interface between the two, right? And this is part of the complexity of graphic fiction as a genre itself, right? To go back to Cynthia's question, which is to say that students often think that reading graphic fiction is all fun and games. But it's really, you're wondering about, do you pay attention to the text? Do you pay attention to the image? Is the image guiding you to the text? Is the text guiding you to the image? And it becomes very complex teaching and learning about issues through this medium. So your thoughts and how you're handling this process and interface would be very helpful.
Yeah, so thank you, Kanika. That's a brilliant question, and actually, it's like it's like you're a graphic novelist. It's a dilemma that you also struggle with. So I use technically I use bubbles and text. And if you look at my editorial cartooning, that's how I've sort of like handled that. And so one of the things that I did as a practitioner is first, after the interviews and all that, then I ended up actually write a synopsis of how I wanted. And then I ended up actually writing what you call the chapters for my roadmap for my chapters. And, 1, 2, 3, there are 5. And then now, with graphic novels, one of the things that you want to do with graphic novels is your images must be powerful. They must speak. So if you are to look at the style is very different from what I've done as an editorial cartoonist. So you're black and white. It's going to be in black and white completely. And so you have actually to figure out also while doing what are you going to convey with each image. So for example, the way I work also is that each image is drawn separately, and it is actually then I'm going to work with design the page and work with the layout artist who would now put it together. Now, in graphic novel, it's a trade-off. If if you are working on a text, if you have actually a story and you have a line, for example, I'll just use it around, I said, Edward looked disappointed. So you have to figure out, okay, so is it actually, can you speak more strongly with your image alone? Then if you can achieve that, there's no need actually to include that in your text. So that's one trade-off that you have to be very careful. So you always also have to have that while you're working. It's like, there are images that I feel that this image speaks to itself. So it will be adding more, why would you actually want to, or if actually, if you have somebody, if you can just draw somebody who's actually, angry and actually whatever, by that, your expression, you have said that. You don't need to include that in your text. So it's also something that you also have to trade off. You have to look at what you do, and it's a constant work that you have to work with.
Thanks, Kanika. Next question.
My name is Asenai. I'm a student here at Stellenbosch University. First of all, I'd like to give a brief overview of the question that I would like to ask. And I think it's a question that I bind it on my conscience that in every setting that I have to ask a question with regards to this matter, because I feel like it's rather becoming controversial or mystified in society for us to have discussions like this. I would like to express my disappointment first with regards to my peers or people in my age nowadays, that settings like this are becoming rather irrelevant. We've become what I would call a TikTok society that's becoming slowly disengaged from society. It's like we don't know what matters anymore at this point, and one can argue why things like that are prevalent. My question being, given South Africa's historical fight against apartheid and this international stance on human rights, particularly with the case happening in Gaza, to me, Stellenbosch University's neutrality on global crises with regards to these conflicts is a reflection of an ethical failure. So, should academic institutions not take a clear moral stance on such issues, especially when lives are at stake? And what can we do to make sure that comic and other fields of research are actually a spark of discourse in society, as they should be, and their voices are not shut down by the statements or the Senate votes that are put in by institutions? Thank you.
I think that's a very good question, and it speaks directly to my area of expertise. Edward will have to answer for STIAS. That's not my job. Yes, as an editorial cartoonist, you take a position, and that it's something that I have not shied away from doing. I mean, you take a position, so you don't just, you just don't draw. And the very meaning of editorial cartoon is to have an opinion. Now, you also have a choice not to do that, but the very reason of that is to take a position. Now, you also do that actually at a cost, and some of us and some my colleagues have actually paid the price for that. I have been dismissed, sacked my newspaper because of taking a stand. Recently, I had actually my work with the Dutch Welle in German Swahili service was discontinued because of the drawings like I've shown, because it's a stand. It is that they don't control the editorial, what I draw, and as a political commentator, you take a stand. This is what I'm saying, because you are commenting, you are saying something. Now, as I said, that comes with a price. I think and I said a lot of my friends have paid the price for that. You had a Charlie Hebdo situation. One of the artists killed, Bernard Velac, who was a friend and somebody we have met twice. We have conducted workshops together. But he was killed, and so there are quite a number of cases in which actually, by taking a stand, that what you're facing. So I agree with you. Yeah, it is something that I also work a lot with young cartoonists. I mean, I mentor and work a lot with the young artists, and that is something that I'm also make them very much aware that, you know, as an artist, you take a position on particular issues. You are not there to make people laugh. I think if I manage to make you laugh in the process, thank you very much. But you are also have a very position on these particular issues.
Very good. Thank you for those questions. We have come to the end of the time here, so I know Lay, I'm sorry, Joe, Joki, another hand there. Please do stay for the refreshments afterwards, catch Gado, and have a further conversation. Also, for those of us who have the pleasure of his presence at STIAS for the rest of the semester, reach out to him. Gado, you've really kind of displayed to us all the skills and expertise and experiences that Herman so craftily presented to us in the introduction. Thank you, Herman, as well. It's been fascinating. Thank you for those questions that we had. Thanks, everyone, for attending. And a final round of applause. Thanks, Gado.